Hey folks, Ariel and Burley over here, where today I was going to try to do some answering questions and answers that got accumulated for a while now that I've been meaning to do this, but it's actually spitting rain and snow outside right now, so this is a good time for me to work at that. And Burley wants some attention right now. These are questions collected from variously people ask things on MeWe, where I post social media stuff, photos and so on, the Rumble channel and the YouTube channel, both of which you can put comments on. You can see all the videos in order under the video tab on either of those places. And one question I know I get is, how is Burley doing? He's facing away from the camera right now because this is the direction he likes to snuggle with me. But overall, pretty good for the fact that he probably shouldn't be alive. How has he actually recovered from that accident? He's doing well. He can run around outside. He seems happy. He doesn't seem to miss his missing eye too much. He gets around pretty good, though sometimes you can tell he's got a blind side. That's further complicated by the fact that he was already losing vision in both eyes, thanks to Panis, which so in his remaining eye, that has nothing to do with the accident. He has vision mostly kind of from the center of it up, but almost nothing from it down. So we do have to be careful about putting anything down low on the ground that's unexpected, because both Burley will run into it because he doesn't really see down, and Tana, who I don't know if she's quite in sight of the camera, she's laying right over here. She's just getting very elderly. She just had a birthday a couple weeks ago. She's in year number 14, and she has really lost almost all of her vision. She has both eyes. She has not lost an eye, but she has lost almost all of her vision. She does spend a lot of the day sleeping. So at this point, with a blind dog and a 3/4 blind dog, we do have to be careful about moving things around that they don't expect, because they know their way around the property. They're very safe. And, with the fence the whole way around, they can't get into any trouble. And most of the time you can't tell if they're blind or mostly blind, because they really do know their way around. They know what to expect, and they patrol the whole property and so on. But every now and then, if you do move something and don't think about it, they will walk smack into it. So he's not quite the same dog he used to be. I don't think his jaw ever healed up in the back. Where it was split in the front, that split healed. He eats food fine and so on, but where it was broken clear in the back here, and the vet said there was no way to secure that. I still hear some creaking and some popping there. I don't think it's solid. It doesn't seem to bother him, but I think that's still an iffy scenario. So he has never again been allowed to chew a big bone, though he does still get some sticks and stuff and chew on them, and it doesn't seem to bug him, but I've never given him a big bone. And we no longer play frisbee, which is a word I think I haven't said in so long he doesn't even react to it anymore. That used to be his favorite thing in the whole wide world. But he would dive so hard after a frisbee, and often landing like on his chin, that I'm afraid we could break his jaw in half if we ever do that again. So that's probably something we'll just never do again in his life. But other than that, he still loves snuggling with his cats, checking on the chickens. He goes out every morning and patrols the whole property. He has very much self-appointed jobs, like he walks the whole fence line, P marks the whole thing, and sees if anything is out of order. And he still likes to chase ravens and hawks and stuff out of the air overhead. They never come down to where he can reach them, but he often can't see them always flying over anymore, but he will hear them if they make any noise, and he will still run after where he hears them and bark and tell them they're not allowed to come near his chickens and so on. So he seems to enjoy his life. He's not quite the same dog he was before. But anyway, he's now laying on the floor here beside me, and we're going to answer other questions. We do enjoy reading people's questions, and I do mean to get to doing these replies a little more regularly, but this summer has just been pretty insane for us. So I'm going to try to do this kind of efficiently, not read every detail of every one, so this doesn't go on for too many hours, but try to answer anything that's actually a question in each one. And we also, even though they're not questions, we really appreciate all the kind comments and thoughts and so on that are not questions that we get from people. Somebody expressed enjoying learning about the siding we were putting on their house that they're going to keep in mind for a future possibility on their house. Somebody, Pat Willie, really loves the opening watching the chickens. Yes, we do hope, like somebody expressed, that with the attention to details, our home will stand strong for many years to come. That is our hope. Laura also said, thank you for sharing a bit of the joy that we are able to enjoy. We do in between all the work and the busyness and the days where things are very stressful and very exhausting. We also do enjoy this life for the most part, and are looking forward to the end of some of these bigger projects like building the house and building everything else from scratch here so that we can just focus more on the day-to-day routine, which is still plenty busy. Mark said one of the tricks they learned is to build a cardboard model of the space and cut out the items to scale and then arrange them inside. And we have done some of that as well. We have a cardboard model of the wood stove floating around in the house. We have several things like that. That is a useful thing when you're trying to arrange things and see how they actually fit. So that is something else you might want to try. Or I know people have told me that like in laying out a tiny house, often they've gotten their trailer deck and actually use masking tape to make lines on the floor to lay out the things that they're trying to fit in and see, can you walk through those spaces and so on and see how that works out. Anyway, so that's all more options for laying out things when you're trying to figure out what fits where. Robin says, I never get tired of hearing the chickens crowing. That's good. We've got some extra boys out there right now that hatched this year. I was actually hoping for a higher hatch of roosters from our hens. We keep a few extra pullets every year so that we always have a variety of ages of chickens in the flock, and then the extra pullets end up various flocks. Our next door neighbors have a flock of our chickens. My one sister-in-law has a flock of our chickens, various other friends and so on. The girls usually end up in somebody's laying flock, and the extra boys end up in freezer camp, but we have some out there that are ready to go there, and we haven't got to that yet. So there is a bit of an excessive amount of crowing at the moment that will calm down a little bit once it goes back to just our two main roosters, who are named Leaf. He's the kind of orange and gray one, Goldie orange gray, and Thorcold, who's the kind of white and black and blue green in the sun rooster. On that note, somebody had asked for a rundown of the animals that we have. So Burley, laying right here, many of you know I've had him since he was a puppy. He is now 8. Did you turn 8 this summer? Let's check. I think he's either 7 or 8. I'd have to actually check his birthday. And he's been my companion for all of those years, and he's a wonderful dog for all of the, taking care of and protecting all of our critters around here. He's very loving and motherly for a boy dog. And since his accident, he's not quite the same as he used to be. And then Tana is a blue heeler. Burley is an English Shepherd. Tana's a blue heeler. Clay has had her since she was, a puppy about this big that she could ride around in his shirt pocket. Her mother had such a big litter that she couldn't nurse them all, so he had her since she was a little bit of a younger age than where a puppy would normally leave its mother, and he's had her since then. And as I just mentioned, she's getting quite old. She seems to enjoy her life. It doesn't bother her at all, but she goes and wanders around outside a little bit. You don't see her in a lot of the videos anymore because she spends a lot of time napping. She likes to nap in the corner here by the couches. She likes to nap in her one bed that's in the corner over here. She's got another bed at the other end of the shop, or she finds a either cool or warm spot depending on the weather outside and just curls up, and she sleeps about 23 hours a day. So that is our dogs. And of the cats, we have Velcro. She's the fuzzy poofy one. She was our original cat. She is 5 this year. And so she's our original grandma cat. She's still a great hunter, very friendly. She was named for her tendency to stick to people. When she was a kitten, she'd just jump on your back or your shoulder or your side, just stick to you because she wanted to be wherever you are. And she still does this. She can be nowhere in sight, and if you sit down outside for just a minute, she's like, there's a lap, and comes racing over and climbs right in your lap. So Velcro is our oldest cat. Then we have her daughter Button, who's kind of a brindley gray. Well, the other 3 are all very similar brindle grays. Button is the one that has more of a fluffy tail that I assume she inherited from her mom. She's got a little bit of a longer fur, and she is also a great hunter and very friendly, though not quite as overwhelmingly friendly as Button is. And then we have two of her daughters that are both the same kind of brindley color. Spooky is the biggest one of, well, the biggest one of all three. Velcro is actually quite a small cat. She is named because she's the only one of other kittens we've ever had that all of our other kittens have been super friendly, super outgoing, and she has always been terrified of people. She was born here, raised right the same as the rest of them. The rest of her siblings were friendly, and at like 2.5 years old now, will sometimes, if I'm careful and move slow, let me pet her. She still hasn't decided that Clay can ever pet her. So we named her Spooky because that's how she behaves, but she's also a great hunter and rodent patroller, and she hangs out. She comes in the barn at night, but she does not come and snuggle in your lap. And then her sister Ponder, who is named for the fact that that's also her personality, just from when she was a little teeny kitten. When everyone else would run off and try something or run off and do something, she would just kind of sit back calmly and be like, I don't know. Let me think about that. I don't know if that's a good idea to try yet. Let me see what happens to you. And that's still kind of her attitude. When everyone else races out of the barn in the morning when I open the door, she'll usually sit there in bed and be like, well, I'm quite warm and comfortable here. I don't know if I see any reason to go anywhere yet. And so anyway, that is our three girls. She is more petite. She's more the same size as her mother and grandmother, but doesn't have the fluffy tail that Button, her mother, does. And certainly isn't as fluffy as her, long-haired as her grandmother. And she's got a bit more of a brown undertone to her brindle. And then Spooky looks very much like her, except she's got a little more gray undertone. And if you see them beside each other, she's actually considerably bigger. And if she sits up just right, Spooky has a little bit of a white spot on her chest that the other two don't. But those three all look very similar. And those are adult cats. And all of the kittens that you saw in videos this summer are all in new homes, busy doing whichever their job is, hunting rodents or snuggling people, playing with children. They are all in other homes. So that is our dogs, our cats, our 2 adult roosters, and we have, I think, maybe 10 of the original 15 of our hens are still alive. Every year it seems like somebody dies of something out of the blue. They're 5 years old as well now, and then we have also some 4-year-old, 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 1-year-old hens in the flock, and they all have color names. You can kind of guess who's who a lot of the time by looking at the colors. Blondie is one of the originals. She's still in love with Clay. He is her favorite person. She's one of the very friendliest of the chickens. We have 50 Shades of Gray. She's a great layer. We have, some of the names are not terribly original. Blackie is the darkest black one. She is the head of the pecking order. She is the boss chicken that gets to do whatever she wants. We have Foggy, who's one of our best moms. She was hatched here. She's 4 years old. She went broody in her 8 months old and wants to hatch about 6 batches of babies a year if I would let her. And she is the very bottom of the pecking order and has to scurry in the corner because Blackie kind of picks on her. And so a pecking order is a very real thing with chickens. So that is our critters around here. And I haven't named any of the bees. There's a few 100,000 bees. Back to questions directly. Several people come out and they can't wait to see some stuff coming out of both the wood stove and the gas stove ovens. Me too. That is something I'm very much looking forward to. Somebody would comment on the composting, the lazy composting. If I get a chance here before it's fully snow covered, I might show you what the compost piles look like right now. I mostly fill them at this time of year when I'm cutting back all the dead flowers and stalks and pea vines and dead potato leaves and stuff out of the garden, and I've got 2 bins clear full, and they really heat up when you fill in that much material at once. I had one stacked like 3 feet over the top of the pallet bin, and by a week later it collapsed below the top, and so I added more stuff because that's how quickly it starts breaking down. Then as it gets colder here in the winter, it will go somewhat dormant, but that method still works great. I just put everything in there, don't turn it. You can see more details of that on that video. Somebody asked about, do we have hogs or a milk cow? No, Jerry, we do not. We don't eat a lot of pork. Clay loves it, but he has some, I don't know if it's really an allergy, but he gets indigestion from eating it, and I just don't particularly like the taste. So other than putting some bacon and some things, we don't eat a lot of pork, so raising a hog wouldn't make sense. And a milk cow would be fine. We only have 3 acres here, and by the time you take space out for a chicken coop and an orchard and so on, if we were, especially in our cold climate, if we were to keep something the size of a cow, we would have to buy a massive amount of hay in order to feed it, and that just doesn't really make sense with the amount of dairy that we would use as 2 people. Though we do get some, we have a good local, well, several good local dairies within a couple miles of us that we can get butter and cream and milk and ice cream and so on from people's, fresh raw milk. So keeping our own cow where we would just have to buy and feed for her hasn't made a whole lot of sense. So no, we do not have either of those. Somebody asked, how did I find or did I restore that Wedgwood gas stove that will be going in our kitchen because it looks to be in excellent condition? No, I haven't touched it yet. It has little bits of dirt in the corner, just like regular, grease from fingers and buildup of stuff that just when I have time here through the winter, can get like a toothbrush and some hot soapy water and clean it up. But it is in excellent condition. And no, I have not restored it at all. I was able to find that through Facebook Marketplace. Somebody was selling it. I don't know a lot of the history of it. We picked it up out of the back of a shipping container sitting on this person's property. They had bought it from someone else who I believe had been using it. They had planned to install it. They actually had bought 2 from 2 different people and had never installed either of them, and were selling them again. That's where we got it from. I find most stuff like that by watching. Craigslist isn't used much in our area, but there are Facebook Marketplace and local classified ads and so on. There's a local group, Misty's List, that's kind of like Craigslist. All of those places. And sometimes you watch for things for years before finding one that's in the condition you want and a price you want and within a driving range you want. Because sometimes I'll see something pop up and think, a 17-hour round trip drive to get it is not really justified. But that's the condition it was in, and it does seem to be in excellent condition for its age, having been made in the late 40s or early 50s. They also asked about the electrical wire on that stove. I'm assuming they're meaning the one that goes, there is a little light up on the top of it. You do not need to use that in order for anything to work on the stove. It works solely on gas. But if you want to be able to turn the light on, you would have to plug that wire in. It appears to be in excellent condition. We did test plug it in. The original light bulb still comes on. I don't know if I will use it. Everything looks intact on it, but I'm not concerned about it. If we were to use it, everything is in working order there. And then the ballpark price to find one, I have seen stoves like that all over the place. Anywhere from free to $50 to, I believe we paid $400 for the one we got, which I thought was a fair price given its really good condition, to immaculately restored, re-chromed ones in the multiple thousands of dollars. So there's quite a range of possible prices there. Somebody asked, will our ducks stay here all winter? Yes, we've had ducks year-round here for 4 years now, going on 5. The ducks are very hardy. While the chickens don't mind the cold, they don't really like when things fall on their heads, so either rain or snow, they tend to stay under cover more of the time. The ducks don't seem to notice rain or snow. They go swimming through the snow. They go wading in ice water. They have a dry little duck hut and yard and stuff, and they do come in there at night because I feed them in there and I close the door on them so that a raccoon or something can't get to them at night. But if it was up to them, they would like to stay out all night. But they do not seem at all bothered by the weather, and they spend all day out in the rain or snow or cold or whatever it is, and that's their choice. They are pretty hardy to cold. There are wild ducks that live here year-round as well with no problem. Lots of just kind and thoughtful comments that are not actually questions. Homeschool and the Croft asks about the big cooker. They're in the UK, called a stove, right? Yeah, that's what I would usually refer to it. It should be a very nice combination for the kitchen to have. We'll probably use the wood stovetop cooking and oven a lot in the winter when it's already hot to keep the house hot. And then in the middle of summer or anytime I want to do something quick and not have to heat up the wood stove if it's not already hot, the gas stove should provide a good option for that doesn't necessarily heat the entire house. Let's see, more questions. Somebody Stefano, I apologize if I mispronounce any of these names. Stefan O'Shaughnessy. Their mother had a stove just like that one, except in 54, and it was a GE, not a Wedgwood. I have seen comments from several people who had similar ones, and that is very neat. So Bonnie Blue says she has the exact same stove in her last house, and she loved the stove. That's always good to hear. I haven't seen too many people ever say they weren't happy with cooking on them. So Magamut said it was so amazing how things like windows and stoves are just showing up. They are, and that is a blessing. It also comes from quite a few years of looking very regularly and having a good idea what you do want, so that when something does become available, you can grab it. Like that happened with this. This is an ice box. This will be going in our house. It's sitting here in the shop right now, but this is an actual antique ice box that is fully functioning. It has other things stored in it right now. It is not being used as an ice box, though I think we will probably end up doing that in the future. But somebody local was getting rid of it one day. They had an ad up that they didn't know if anyone wants anything to do with these anymore, and they were asking $100 for it. I've been casually looking for one of these for probably 15 years at that point, and ones that are in good shape tend to go for somewhere between like $3,000 to $6,000, which wasn't in my budget. This one is unrestored but in excellent used condition, and that wasn't a lot of money, and I happened to be the first one to see their ad, and I said I wanted it, wasn't going to haggle on the price, I'd be right there with cash. And by the time I got there, they said, wow, there's really a lot of interest. I had like 17 more people after you who said they all wanted it if you didn't show up. I thought, I bet you did. And so I handed them their cash and brought this home, and I'm really excited about that. But yes, this stuff does show up, but sometimes it takes a long time, many, many years of looking. So if you are going to acquire things secondhand like that, persistence and patience are probably going to be helpful skills. Renee Burnett asked, can I film the finished supports for the stoves? She's trying to picture in her head what comes after the concrete pad. I will. They're not actually built yet because we're working inside on bad weather days, and then the sun came back out, so we're working back outside. So I will, as soon as we get the actual little wall post support that goes between that concrete pad and the underside of the floor to reinforce where both those heavy stoves will sit, I will film that. It's not done yet. That's why I haven't yet. Somebody shared a video on a cool refrigerator, 1956 Frigidaire, and if we're going to have an electric fridge in there, which we have some debate over, I would love to find an old vintage fridge in good working order as well. That's something that has not showed up yet, but maybe one of these days it will. Lots of other people loved or could relate to having similar old stoves, or have mothers or grandmothers who had ones. Somebody commented that the weather forecast, I think that must have been in relation to when I said that they had been wrong for a solid week, is running on only computer projections at this moment, and that's not as close. That may be, but our area, they've been wrong more than 50% of the time for quite a few years. So whoever was involved in the last bunch of years, not just the last few weeks, would have something to do with that. And I don't know if that's even the fault of the weather forecasters or other people who are manipulating weather in unnatural ways that are making it difficult to forecast. But anyway, I look at the weather guessers' guess for taking it as a guess, and they're very often not correct. Let's see, next question. Yes, none of the modern programmed obsolescent articles that break in 2 years. That is my goal and what I'm hoping to end up with in this house. And someone recommended downloading SketchUp to design in 3D. I didn't actually use SketchUp, though I'm familiar with it, but I did use a program called Floor Planner. I believe it's floorplanner.com. That's basically a free CAD program. If you're doing something simple, there's paid versions of it. If you're doing something more complicated, our house is not very complicated, so I was able to lay everything out in that as well, and that was helpful for some of our planning. JMEH 2388 asked about the story behind that gas stove. Like I said, I don't really know its history other than it sounded like it had been in use up until the person I got it from purchased it and put it in storage, and then we got it from them. So I don't know a whole lot of the history before that. David asked if I got a treadle sewing machine and table yet. That is also still on my potential find purchase list. I don't actually enjoy sewing. It's actually like my least favorite activity to do, but I do know how to sew. That's one of the things my mother taught me to do. And I like having the option of fixing things or doing something if I want, even though it is not something I ever do for fun. Though I know lots of people enjoy sewing, I don't, but I would like to get an old functional treadle sewing machine that works without power to have for doing those things at some point. I do have an older electric one. I mean, it's nothing fancy. I got it at a thrift store for $20, but it's an old one. It does plug into a wall and it does work, but I would like to have a treadle option for that. Lots of comments about people who love the stove, either one, the wood or the gas one. Neo Anderson commented that they looked at the Nectar Bunbaker wood stove for their big old drafty house and concluded it probably wasn't big enough to heat that. And I believe that's probably, I don't know how big and drafty of a house they have, but it's, I think the one we got is rated to heat 1,800 square feet or something like that. Our house is 1,000, so it should be plenty much for ours, and our house will also not be drafty. But if you do have a bigger house, it probably would not sufficiently heat the whole thing by itself. From people living in smaller places in general and actually living off-grid or close to it and actually relying on it for both heating and cooking, from everything I could read, it seemed to generally be very well loved by almost everyone who had one and was actually using it functionally day to day. And Juju Bean said, it looks like their place, they moved in to get out of the cold, but then were working around themselves. And then people would ask them where things are supposed to go when nothing is done yet. That is what, we've both done that kind of thing at times before, and what makes us thankful that right at the moment we have this space where we can just park all of our stuff in the end of the shop here and stay out of the way of the building and the house till it's actually done, so that goes a little more efficiently. I realize that's not always possible, but where we have the option to do that, I think that will make things go a little more smoothly, to be out of our own way while we finish that. Moose had said thanks for talking through the chimney location. He's currently building a little house. You can see his stuff over at Moose Villa off-grid, and planning for a wood stove in that. He's in Michigan at the moment, which is also a cold and snowy place. Are you telling me you want to go outside? Hang on here, we're interrupting the video for a minute. Burley needs to go outside. Kara Wick in her Peace Coaching had asked about the kitchen cabinets that we're currently using while we're camping here in the shop. She thought we were planning to move those into the little house. We were talking about doing that. They're not really attached here. They're just sitting on the concrete slab, and I use them every day. But when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law offered us the set that they had acquired from someone else's remodel and were no longer planning to use themselves, those are just nicer and better shape. None of the doors are cracked and so on. And so when we were gifted those, we decided we would put those into our little house, and the other ones will stay here being storage in the shop. We don't plan to get rid of them. Alexis3447 commented that Clay is an excellent builder for sure, and that is true. We are very much benefiting from his lifetime of skills, having done all kinds of building and being the general contractor and having done all those steps. I know a lot of people have a lot of skills in a lot of areas, and I feel very blessed that I happen to have a guy who can do all of the areas, start to finish, for everything. Some of them are not his favorite things to do. He's mentioned that several times. He was used to having a subcontractor who could do this part or that part that's not his favorite thing to do. But fortunately, he does know how to do all of them, and that has been a huge, huge blessing. Several people mentioned that stove having, the gas one having crumb catchers and a grease trap. Those are really handy. Like I said, it wasn't the same stove, but I remember having that on one of the stoves in a house I grew up in, and just for cleaning and maintaining, if you actually do regular cooking, that is a really, really handy thing. Mary West said, seems like washers, dryers, stoves, and fridges are only made to last 15 years max now. And if I look at the amount of secondhand ones I see available that are nearly new, like a year or two, that somebody said, well, I quit running, I'm still under warranty, the company sent me a new one rather than fix it, and here's this one if someone wants to figure it out. Seems like a lot of them don't last anywhere near 15 years either. One of the reasons that I love my hand washing machine and doing most things in a non-electric fashion. Barbara Koenig said she does not like the snow on the video. The snow, lots of people said they love it. I know lots of people don't like the snow. That's one of the reasons Wyoming's one of the least populated, it is the least populated state in the country, and that makes sense to me. Winter is my favorite, but even most of my friends don't love winter as much as I do. So it's fortunate that we can all find climates that have weather that we like at least a good bit of the time. And yes, all of our critters do really seem to like playing in the snow. Even Tana, being an old dog, she gets more bouncy when it snows. Burley gets just beside himself with zoomies. The ducks seem excited. The chickens kind of seem indifferent. The cats will do a little bit of picking up their paws, like they don't like it for a minute, and then they'll go dive into it and burrow in it and pounce in it, and they seem to like it just fine too. It is fun to watch all the creatures in the snow and all the wild birds and all of that as well. A couple of people mentioned the color of the siding that's going on there. The dark gray does match the same color scheme as the shop and the chicken barn and the beehives and the tiny house and everything else, but that was picked because you probably want to do the exact opposite thing if you're in a hot climate, but because we're actually looking to soak up heat, because most of the year here it is cold. So the dark gray and the black are good for adding a little heat. And that is part of the goal. Plus it is a color that I like, things that kind of blend into the background and don't stand out too much. Rocket Scientist asked an update on the cats and their names, so I did go through that. Velcro and Zipper were our first two. Zipper was a boy, he's no longer with us. He lost his life to some kind of a predator a couple years ago. I'm not sure what, it may have been another tomcat, but unfortunately we did lose him. And all four of the girls that we have here, Zipper, Button, Ponder, and Spooky, are have been here for a while, and we hope they will be here for a long while more. And I'm glad for all of you that don't like snow at all that you can enjoy it a little bit from a distance without getting cold yourself from watching our videos. And PSC McCall had drought all summer and fall in Alabama and then tornadoes. That is kind of crazy. I don't really know. I've never lived in a place that was regularly tornado-y. That seems like a crazy weather thing to deal with to me. I know some people think that dealing with blizzards and deep snow is crazy, but that seems crazier to me. Nancy Parker asked about harvesting rainwater for the plants. I've done some videos on that. Almost all of the rainwater off of all of our roofs drains into planters or flower beds, or like the water pans in the chicken yard. There's like one roof edge I haven't figured out how to do anything really useful with, but as far as a rainwater catchment system that's like piped into a tank and stuff, that doesn't really work here because we get almost no rain all summer long most summers. Like we had one rainstorm this summer, and then our moisture comes down as snow, and to try to collect that into that kind of a system without freezing and bursting your pipes, because they have to be outside to collect it, that's just really challenging here. So it's easiest for us to just drain the water off of roofs directly into watering flower beds, planters, food that we're growing, that kind of thing. And like this summer, it still didn't really do any watering, and I had to water everything because when there's no rain, there's no rainwater to collect. We do, however, not just us, but the whole area uses the snow water through the whole year. That's what runs through our irrigation ditches. It's what lets us flood water the orchard and some of the other spots on the property and so on. So most of our moisture comes down as snow, and we are able to, as the whole area in general, well beyond our property, spread and soak that in slowly through the entire summer and keep things watered. And somebody asked about why not, several people asked about why not gutters on the house. In one of the videos I did mention that when you have snow that slides, they tend to rip gutters when snow and ice comes shooting off a roof, it tends to rip gutters out and damage the roof. There's almost no gutters on houses in this part of the world because of that. So usually, if you think ahead, what you try to do is put doors and such that you walk in and out of under a gable end or something like that, where it's not going to shed on your head, because, well, gutters are an absolutely fabulous solution for many places, and it was something I grew up being used to in, say, Pennsylvania, where you don't tend to have snow sliding off the roof regularly for 8 months a year. They just don't really work because of that here. Catherine Kelly asked for a grand tour of the property, exactly where everything is placed and why. That is something I have been thinking about doing and never got to the last couple summers because we were too busy. But maybe next summer, it's kind of hard to see as well in the winter because so many things are under snow. But maybe next summer I will get to kind of what we have laid out and why, and we did put some thought into that, and some of our thoughts changed over time because we've built everything here ourselves, and slowly over time we have had some time to think, well, we were going to put that over there, but actually because of this that won't work very well and we'd rather have that over here. So sometimes it'd be nicer to have everything done faster, but sometimes there are advantages to getting to it slower because you hopefully get a little more time to figure out if that's what you actually want before you do it. So I like the rocks around the outside of the house, which do catch the rainwater and splash it out into what will be a flower bed, or veggie bed. You can't see any of that, but because none of it's planted yet, to be clear, there's just rocks there. But anyway, still got some rock to finish, which I don't know if I'll get to this year as the snow's coming, but next spring certainly there'll be rock under all those drip edges that help splash that water out toward the plants and make sure it doesn't splash back on the house. And I always love hearing from JB, Egg1TB, and everybody else who has been following along on this journey for many years, since back in the clearing and so on. That is fun. I can't believe so many of you guys have been interested that long. Carolyn Silvers mentioned another option rather than a blackwater toilet is using a combustible toilet that does require electricity. I am familiar with them existing. I've had a few friends in tiny houses that had incinerating toilets. I don't know if any of them were super happy with them, but I've never personally used one. We really like our composting setup, so I've just never had a motivation to find something else. There might be some good ones out there. She also asked, the big stones under the drip line there along the house are so uniform. Did we gather them from our land? Yes, all of the roundish ones, they all came out of the hole that is the cellar under the house, and the more flat-sided ones we had to get from a neighboring property that has rocks that shape. Everything on our property is actually rounded off, like river bottom rock. That's just the shape of the rock here, but not very far away there's slabby, jagged rocks that crumble out of the hillside, and so that's where some of those came from. But all the round ones, they did come out of the cellar space in the, what is now the cellar space in the house. Rural Living 8572 said that they're curious, how deep does the ground freeze go here? That depends on whether the ground is cleared or not. If you have a cleared spot, like a lane or a driveway or something, a pathway where you're clearing it, it can go 6-8 feet down. If you have water lines or something that can't freeze that runs under an area like that, normally what is done is you dig, you don't try to dig 10 feet down, you dig like 4 feet down and then lay your line at the bottom of it, then actually put like blue board, like foam insulation board over it, extending out over it, backfill your dirt, and then that insulation board here with your pipe in the center of it kind of makes a triangle that even if the frost goes down around it, it'll keep it thawed in that little triangle. So that seems to work, but in places where you don't touch the snow, like out in the middle of a yard or a field, where it's not compacted, it's not walked on, it's not shoveled, and so on, the ground will freeze deeply and then it will often thaw right back to the surface, where if you clear that snow midwinter, because there's such deep insulation of snow on it, it'll actually be muddy right on the surface. Now, as soon as you shovel it, usually that night it'll freeze rock solid because you've taken its insulation away. But in those places, it can actually defrost after freezing hard, and then as the snow melts in the spring, it'll often freeze hard again. But anywhere that's cleared, our frost line here can go very deep, for sure. Somebody said one of our roosters has the strangest crow they've ever heard. That was on a video from a little bit ago, so it might have been one of the teenage roosters that's growing up out there. They can make some very funny strangled sounds when they are learning to get good at crowing. Kind of like a teenage boy with their voice changing. They sound a little bit funny till they get that all figured out. Tiny Dancer asked, how do we plan to prevent ice damming from happening on the overhangs? I'm assuming she's meaning on, or he, whoever that is, on the roof overhangs. Will the eaves have a heating element? No, there are heating elements you can put in places where ice dams happen. Our whole roof has a single shed that looks like this, and then the mudroom has like a mirror image of that, just a smaller one. Usually when you get ice dams is when you have what's called a valley in a roof, where two parts come together in that kind of a shape and they get ice into that space. With just a flat one, you normally do not see any ice damming like that. Anything that builds up just slides straight off the edge. So I've never seen that be a problem. The tiny house roof sheds straight off both sides. It's never had ice damming. The chicken barn actually just has one shed roof. It's never had ice damming. The shop has 2 straight roofs. It's never had ice damming, so I don't anticipate that we should have that problem on the house at all. But I do know what you're talking about. It does happen on a lot of houses here. If you have multiple roof pitches and angles and stuff that come together and make inside corners like that, it is often a problem. And there is like electrical heat tape that can be put in there. People get contractors out midwinter with steamers to try to take it off. That's where you often get roof leaks. That is an issue that we wanted to avoid ever having, and that's partly why we chose the roof shape that we did. Sharvoa 6 asked if the tiny house is requiring any maintenance since we're not living in it right now. Not other than the normal dusting and so on. We have had, every time we have friends and family who have come to stay, be it for a night or a week or whatever, through the summer, that's been the guest house, so it has been lived in off and on, and yeah, other than routine cleaning and changing the bedding and that kind of thing, she's not requiring any particular effort to do anything, because there have been people in and out regularly. Denise Jones suggests we paint the propane tank dark gray to match all the other outbuildings. I would actually love to do that, but propane tank that's out in full sun, they're generally white or a light color because you don't want that tank to heat up too much. So I think we'll leave the tank actually stay white, though I would love to paint it dark gray and screen it off with bushes and flowers and that kind of thing. Angela Cross asked if we will have a pathway from the house out to the driveway. Yes, that 15, 20 feet or whatever. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do, but we'll have some kind of a little path. I think that was on the video where I showed all that rock that looks bare and dirt and mud from constructing the house that will eventually be green. And I know somebody else asked, will part of that yard that's on there be clover? Yes, I'm sure we'll have some grass in it too, because around here that's nearly impossible to get rid of. But yes, I will be planting clover into it, and it will have dandelions and other things, but there will be a nice green mowed area around the house, and we will have some kind of a pathway through that so you can walk on a rainy day without getting too muddy or that kind of thing. Guinevere also lives in Wyoming in a different area, and she said she has noticed as well that what I said about gutters is true, and the snow slides off the roof and just shreds them. Promptly followed by Tolo Reading had asked why no gutters and rainwater collection, which they understood after I explained it, but yeah, that's our situation here with ice, snow, and most of the rain coming down as the form of snow. Narrow Path Traveler thinks we need some evergreen shrubs on the corners around the house and so on. We probably actually, that would look cool. We probably actually won't do anything like that because most of the roof line, the roof will shed down on it. And I've seen a lot of houses here where you have a nice little shrub that looks great all summer. And then when hundreds of inches of snow shear off of your roof and pile down onto winter, by spring it's like looking like this and crushed and squashed and with broken branches. So things like that do much better if they're a little further away from the house. So things that I plan to plant around the house many of them will be perennial, which means they come up every year, but things that die back flat to the ground so that they're not crushed and damaged, their branches and bushiness and so on through the course of every winter, because that does tend to happen here. Dodie Barnes asked how deep do we have to dig pipes in to be below freeze depths. On the graywater drain field, that pipe is about 4 feet down, a little bit more than that, but it will, it does not have standing water in it. The pipe itself is sloped slightly so that it will drain, and it does not come out of the house in a spot that we will be clearing, like a pathway or a driveway or something like that, like I discussed a minute ago. So the snow itself will help insulate that ground, because yes, even though a lot of pipes are buried to that depth here, you do have to be considerate of that. If you're clearing over top of where something is buried, you can still have the frost line go considerably deeper than that. Yeah, there's the comment I was thinking of. Joanne K had asked about clover in the yard. Yes, I love the look of clover. I love the color of clover. I love the feel of it under your feet. And when it blooms, the bees and the butterflies and everything, absolutely love it. So yes, I will definitely be planting more clover. At the moment, I've got tall clovers planted in the orchard and so on. I mean, right around the house, I don't want 4 foot plus tall yellow sweet clover, just because that's too hard to walk through if it's an area you're trying to walk all the time. But we do have a lot of stuff like that planted around the property for the pollinators, and they really enjoy it. Jilly Mills said that our chickens crack her up because they look like a bunch of old ladies at a tea party with different dresses on and hairdos. Not every Icelandic chicken has a hairdo, but I think all but 2 of ours do, because I like the look of the hairdos, and so I tend to always pick girls to keep that have hairdos. So pretty much the whole flock has hairdos now, and I'm so used to looking at them now when I see chickens that don't have the poofy feathers on top of their head. They kind of look a little naked and weird to me. JP Merrick had said that we all wish we had a Clay living in our house. He's like a Swiss Army contractor. He can do so many things. This comment, we really appreciate it. It made Clay and I laugh a lot now every time he's doing yet another different thing that he actually knows to do. I believe this was meant as in like a Swiss Army knife multi-tool that can do many things. I like to tease him about him being my Swiss Army contractor person who can do a little bit of everything. Tiny Dancer had also asked about Burley. If you joined later on here, check out the beginning of the video, because I did go through how his recovery has gone. Overall good, probably never quite complete. Several people asked what the black and white big birds were called that were hopping around the ground in one of the last videos. Those are magpies. They're in the same family as crows, ravens. They're corvids. They're very intelligent birds. They're not quite as big as a raven or a crow. They're generally scavengers. They will happily scavenge, dead animal carcasses in the wilderness, garbage cans in subdivisions. They are very good at finding things and cleaning them up. They are pretty to watch. And they also can be a little bit obnoxious, like many smart creatures that can figure out how to get themselves in trouble. But they are very pretty, and they do look black and white in most lights, and if the light hits them just right, they have some very iridescent blue-green colors in their feathers as well. But they're a bird that there's quite a few of in this area, and so we do see them around. Burley likes to chase them off if he sees them, because he is of opinion that they're too big of a bird to be around his chickens, though a magpie actually wouldn't hurt a chicken, at least not an adult one. They would eat chicks if they could. Congrats to Mary Hart, who said she's racing against winter because she just bought a tiny house and needs to get it all situated before things freeze up there. That's exciting. I'm happy for you. Hopefully it is able to get all set up just perfectly before winter. Jane Smith and a few other people had asked what we'll be doing with the boiled and crushed chicken bones, food for the garden beds. They are excellent for that if you need calcium in your soil, which lots of soils do. Our particular spot here has excessive amounts of calcium in the soil, so we actually don't put them in the garden or the compost, because we actually need to balance out the excessive amounts of calcium in our soil and water here. But what we actually do with them is feed them to usually when I have a batch like that, the dogs each eat a little, the cats each eat a little, and the chickens themselves eat up the scraps, kind of like they eat eggshells and oyster shells for extra calcium. The laying hens use a lot of calcium, so that's what we do with the bones. But if your soil needs more calcium, which is true for a lot of areas, using them in the compost or the garden is also a great idea. That's just not what we in particular do with ours. Just a Slam asked or mentioned that our fluffiest cat really looks like a little lynx. She does. It's funny, if you see her in person, Velcro is quite a tiny cat, nothing the size of a lynx, but her coloration, her face, and the fluffy tips of her ears and stuff, she really does look like she could be some kind of little wild mountain cat. Some people have also said she really looks like she could be a Maine Coon. They tend to be huge. As far as I know, she's purebred Wyoming ranch cat mutt and has no Maine Coon in her. And she is tiny, but she is kind of that look for being a mini little lady. I always love when Penny and other people tell me that their cats want to subscribe to the videos, or that they watch all of them because they like watching the birds and the chickens and so on in the videos. I like that we have cat fans of this channel. Several people comment we got the lower edges of that siding done just in time before the snow really got going, and that was true. We have, Clay's got the siding done fully on a little over 3/4 of the house, the mudroom entry door, that whole side, and 2 other sides. So the only thing left is to finish the siding on the south side, which fortunately here is the warm and sunny side in the winter, if the sun is out and it's not spitting snow and rain like it is right at the moment. So hopefully we will still be able to finish that up, but that's the only part not fully done right at the moment as I film this particular video. Mark M. had asked if the apple tart was a family recipe or where it came from. No, it was a internet-inspired recipe, just looking for other good ways to do things with lots of apples when we had plenty around to use up. But it's probably going to have become a family recipe in our family because we both really enjoyed it. We've made multiple of them since, and I believe I will be making more on future apple seasons. Cindy Mann had asked about Tana. Where's Tana? Did she pass? No, like I described earlier, she's just not, she doesn't end up being in a lot of the videos at this point because she spends so much of her day sleeping and not out and doing things. So you don't see her as much anymore, but she's on the floor over there right now. She's relocated. Rose Swartzett said, with all those beautiful cats, we probably have no problem with mice and rats. Fortunately, there's not really rats around here. We have mice and voles, which look like little fat mice that like to eat your garden and your fruit trees and so on. And yes, if we didn't have our 4 kitty ladies, I am quite certain we would not be able to grow anything at all around here because there are still a lot of rodents. We're surrounded by pastures, hay fields, cow pastures, horse pastures, and so on most sides still, and that tend to be places with lots of little rodents, and they like to come and munch on things here. Francis LH asked, are the tall spiky purple flowers plantain or comfrey? I don't have any tall spiky plantain. I'm not sure which one they're thinking of, but we do have tall comfrey. I've got quite a few of that. They have kind of a bell-shaped purple flower that hangs down on the top. And then the ones that are more spiky straight up with fine little flowers on them were probably one kind of mint or hyssop. Those I've got multiple varieties of mints and hyssops, and when they bloom they have a purplish flower kind of on a spike. So if you were looking at one with a bell shape, that probably was a comfrey with a wider leaf, and if it was a smaller leaf with more of an upright spike with lots of little flowers, it was probably one of the hyssops. They're a little more purple than the some of the other mints. They're cousin plants. I loved, it's not a question, Margaret Elizabeth had a comment expressing her admiration for the whole cycle of life with growing and composting and summer to winter to, spring again and so on. It was just very, very beautifully worded and encouraging. We love comments like that, even when they're not questions. And I also love all the people who comment on the videos of just the scenes of the animals and the weather and the flowers and stuff, that they, give them a relaxing, peaceful time in life. I'm glad that I can share that with you because that's part of what we love about this life, even when some of it is hard. K.A. Sessions asked, is there another enclosure for the chickens? Did they miss that build? No, if you, in the little square looking pen with the black tarp over the top, we did not have that before this year, and we put it together this spring, and I never got a video done about doing it, but it's basically kind of like a dog kennel set up with a roof over it. And I've used several things over the years. You can go back and look at the little mobile chicken tractors that I can pull around that I did the first year we got them, that worked to contain the little birds and so on, and they worked. I'd used some very old lumber, and they've since kind of disintegrated again, and they were a little bit inconvenient to get in and out of, so we've tried to figure out over time how to make that more efficient, because for the first few days that after chicks are hatched with their mom, it's really nice to have a spot where they can just be with her and not get hassled by anyone else or distracted or lost till they get a little faster and better at following her around. And then they can run around the whole property and they're fine. But it's nice if they have a few days where they can have some separation to do that. And then primarily, the birds you saw in there were probably all of our teenage roosters, which run around fine with the whole flock till about the time they get to the age where they realize, I'm a boy and you're a girl, and all of a sudden there's way too many boys in proportion to the girls, and they can be pretty rough on them if I don't separate them. So what we use that for, and it gets moved around to new spots all the time, is to let new mamas with their chicks have a couple days to get bonded and get fast and used to keeping up, and then the rest of the time the chicks spend their time in with the whole big flock and following their moms around. But then primarily is that we could sort teenage roosters into, and they could still get moved around like a chicken tractor onto new patches of grass, but they can't go overwhelm all the egg-laying ladies in our flock. Lisa Cook asked, when do we guesstimate being moved into our home, Easter or later? We don't know for sure. The general hope is that we will get this siding finished outside here this winter, be able to do interior stuff, or kind of before winter gets really wintry here, finish interior stuff through the winter, and sometime in spring, which here can be fairly late in the year, maybe actually be able to move in. But that will happen as it happens, so we see that. That's kind of what we're shooting for. Lynn Greenegg commented on the amaranth growing on the planters along the shop wall here. Several other people had asked what that was. The kind of purple leaf, tall, spiky flowers, that is amaranth. And yes, I did know you can eat the leaves, especially when they're younger, as like a salad green. They're kind of tasty. And then it makes a little teeny weeny seed that birds can eat, or you can harvest and use for grain. But they're also just pretty, and they're beautiful as a cut or a dried flower as well. But if you were wondering what the tallish, spiky, purple, kind of purple-red leafed and flowered plants were, those are amaranth. And I always love seeing all the comments about where people are watching from, like Annette Gregg in Ireland, and Patty Monhouse in California, and Sue McKnight in Vermont, and then there's conversations back and forth and so on and so forth, but in Southern Oregon and Southwest Ireland and so on. It's just fun to see where all around the planet people are watching videos from. Lots of people like the color of that dark gray siding against the copper windows. Yeah, that having copper windows wasn't originally in our house plans, but it has worked out really well, and it does look really nice with the color scheme we already had for everything around the property. Several questions about the hardy board, the concrete siding. Clay, I want to film here while he's still working on that, just some of his little tips for actually working with it. If you are ever happen to be going to do that, he'd done hardy siding on many houses in the past before ours, and so he does have a good bit of experience with that, and he's figured out just some little things that make working with it easier over time, because it's not the easiest material to work with. Somebody had said they considered it and didn't use it because you get so many broken boards. If you don't know how to handle it, they are easy to break. It's kind of like a multi-stranded cord. Any one board is not that hard to snap if you bend it at the wrong angle. But when you lap them all together, it becomes very strong. Anyway, so hopefully I can do a video of just some little tips on, his experience with what makes working with, the concrete fiber cement board siding a little easier to do, but it is doable. It's not the most fun stuff to work with, but hopefully it will be there forever and be very durable and very weatherproof and very fireproof and all of that. So I think it will be worth it in the end, even though it's not something that you're like, yay, this is so much fun to work on installing. Ajaxis had said their 14-year-old home has hardy board on it. It's refreshing to know that during the wildfire smoke that spread across from northern Canada a year ago, that it was not in danger of fire. That is one of the main reasons that we had picked it as well. Lois Patrick asks what we're going to do for flooring in the house. Are we going to polish the concrete? There's not actually a concrete floor in the house. There's a concrete foundation that's holding the walls, and then down the cellar is just dirt and, you know, covered with some gravel in between that. So the floor, that's not the cellar. There's not 2 stories, but there's the cellar that's down in the dirt, and then the first floor that is at the moment it's just what's called subfloor. You know, it's a sheet of a laminated wood material that's generally used to put the subfloor together, and then usually on top of that people put their carpet or tile or hardwood or whatever they're going to do. We are doing a wood option that I think is going to be pretty cool, but that's going to take some time to explain, and so I'll get back to that when I get to a video of actually doing that. We have to do all kinds of things inside before you can get to finishing the floor. Chris Wren had asked another a question at the Amaranth. Do I harvest the grain or give it to the chickens? From that, yes, if it gets to being mature enough to make a little grain, I do. Some years, like this year, it freezes before it actually has any mature grains, so I use it as a cut flower. I use it as compost. The chickens do peck some at the flowers themselves, but it didn't have enough time before it froze in order to make a mature grain. But if we get some, that is wonderful. And Clara Kirshen had asked about that as well, that it looked like I was composting them. Did they not ripen into seeds yet? Yes, that's often an issue here. Many things that do ripen into seeds often, you know, theoretically, often do not actually have time to quite do that before things freeze to death here. It was 10 degrees the other day and not above freezing for multiple days in a row, so it's pretty much everything that is not a perennial is pretty long dead out there. TJS 114 had asked about metal roof and lightning being attracted to it. That has not been a major issue. I mean, I think 60% something of all the buildings in this area have metal roofs on them, and when I was a child, there tended to be lightning rods on the roof of every building around. Most of them were not metal roofs at that point, but that seems to have gone out of style, and it seems that in general, while a direct lightning strike can certainly melt down some electronics in a house if the current sends a surge through your wires and into your phone or your computer or something like that, that as long as the house is attached to the ground, the wiring itself is grounded, and so on, that just doesn't seem to be actually much of a issue. And we do get lots of lightning storms around here, and I've actually never heard of a house being struck particularly because it had a metal roof. More often trees and it seems to often be the height is what gets struck, so it's usually trees and so on. I'm not saying we couldn't get a direct lightning strike, that's possible, but I think that it would happen either way, whether we had a metal or otherwise roof. Torchwood panel, I assume, is maybe outside of the US, because when I was discussing roofing materials, I had mentioned shingle roofs being very short term overall. A lot of them are designed to last 10 to 15 years, very high quality ones, maybe 20 something, because the slate roofs, as they mentioned, which they're very correct about, should last 100 plus years. Fired clay tile roofs 150. When I'm saying shingle, what's usually referred to that here in the States is an asphalt mixture that's like little bits of rubber glued onto a piece of paper with asphalt, and you lap them on like shingles, just like a slate roof would be done, except it's a material that does decompose over time, and they're not a long-term roof. Yes, if you actually have slate or something like that making up your shingles, that and there were slate roofed barns and such where I grew up in Pennsylvania, those do last multi-hundreds of years. What I was referring to is asphalt shingles, which are just, they're not a long-term durable material, not nearly like slate. But apparently maybe those are not used much in some other countries, but that's the discrepancy there. I wasn't talking about a stone roof lasting that short, but the asphalt shingles don't last super long. Suzanne Hunt and some others didn't notice until one of the videos where the leaves were falling off the trees that we are actually not very far off of a main road. Yes, there's a little county road, and most of the year, fortunately, it is screened by the tree line, but when the leaves fall, then it is much more exposed, and it is also much busier than it used to be. But that is there, and most of the year you can't see it because of all the leaves on the things. Mary Hart also asked, what do we do with our composting toilet waste? Do we use it as human manure on our land? We do. You can check out, I have multiple videos on composting and the toilet setups both inside the house and what we do with it outside, on using a Nature's Head commercial composting toilet, on using bucket toilets because we have and do both of these over time, and how I compost it. But basically, real quick, the human manure goes into its own bin, it sits there for a year, and then when it's a year old and I'm, say, doing the cleanup that I'm doing right now of dead things out of the garden, I will layer in this year's dead things with layers of last year's human manure until I have a full bin. Then that whole thing just sits for another year, and then the following year I use it on beds, planters, around bushes, fruit trees, etc. At that point, the human manure is all 2 years old. Even at 1 year, it is probably fully safe and whatever, just to be extra safe. It's all gone for 2 years of breakdown, and yes, we do use it for fertilizer for all kinds of stuff around here, and I have lots of videos detailing stuff. If you just go to the channel and search for composting or toilet or any of those words, you should get a whole ton. I think there's even a playlist called Composting Toilets or something that has a lot of those details in there that I'm not going to fully cover here so this doesn't get so insanely long. I don't know if anyone's still watching right now. On the video where I had discussed some of the reasons not to build a house in 2025 and the issues with material quality and so on, it seemed like there were so many comments. A lot of people could relate to similar experiences, that just quality control is really lacking. I had one person who said they built a house with absolutely no issues with the quality of any material they got, which is awesome. I'm glad for them. That did seem to be the case for most people. And somebody said, what are large-scale home builders using? I would say probably fairly crummy materials. We've encountered more than one person. Somebody was living in a fairly new house. They didn't build it. They bought it a couple years old from the people who had built it, and they are currently trying to figure out what to do about the issue that their foundation has sank 8 inches on the one corner of the house versus the other corner, and this is on brand new construction. So pretty sure we're not the only people experiencing that kind of thing. But it was interesting to me that some people thought that the problem was coming from things outside of the country or things inside of the country or from big companies or from small companies, and I don't know what all is causing it, but what I can say is that we've had problems with materials from all of those things, whether it was actually something manufactured in the next town over by people we personally know, or whether it was coming from our region, neighboring states and actually manufactured there, or whether it was coming from an international kind of corporation kind of product. We've just had issues with quality control for all of that. And like I said, it seemed like many of you guys had very, very similar experiences with materials, especially anybody else who has done some building, which is unfortunate. But yeah, that does seem to be a problem with quality control and across many industries, not just building. I don't know what's going to happen after. If it gets much worse, everything's going to really just crumble really quick. But multiple people on that subject had suggested you got to make sure you pick every board of your own lumber out, which if you're in a place where you can do that and say that board's not straight enough, I want this one and so on, that's great. If you're buying of the size of full units banded together, you can't really do that, for one. And two, our only local lumber yard here insists that they will load lumber. You cannot pick boards. Their stated reason is because all of their wood is good. So therefore you cannot pick out which boards you want. Now, seems fairly obvious that if you thought all of your boards were 100% good, you wouldn't be concerned about somebody picking through them, because anything I would pick would be good and anything you would have left would also be good. So there's a slight logic problem with that, but they do not allow you to actually pick through the boards and pick the ones you want versus not. And yes, we could buy lumber from much, much further away, but that is a disadvantage of having a small town where there's one place to get it. And so the way they do it is the option you have unless you want to travel much further. And it's interesting, like Susan Fritz said her son works for a window manufacturer, that his whole job is to travel the country fixing issues with brand new windows, and he never catches up. That's just emblematic, one of many, many comments where people have had similar experiences with the quality of materials, which is very unfortunate. And I think because this video has probably gotten plenty long enough, I'm going to wrap up with a question from Judith Huntley, who said she would like to see what the old clearing that the tiny house used to be in looks like this many years later. I think that you would not, actually. I have not been back. I don't plan to go back. I do know that the entire clearing was bulldozed to create a road through it to a place a person was planning to build a very large home, and I'd like to just remember it as it was and not see it in that state. So that's what I know about it. I haven't been back to see it, and for that reason, don't really want to go. But anyway, that's what I do know about that. So that's why there won't be any pictures of what that area looks like anymore, because I don't think there's anything really to look at. So thanks if you guys stuck out for this long of questions and answering those. I will try to get question and answer videos done a little more frequently, hopefully through the winter. And like usual, what if I get many people asking the same question, I try to do a video just dedicated to that topic. Anyway, hope you guys all have an absolutely wonderful day, late summer, fall, winter, whatever it is where you are. And I'm going to go see if Clay needs a hand with what he's working on and get back to doing other stuff here. Thanks for watching.
Thank you everyone for watching. It means a lot, and I hope you learned something along the way.
If you know somebody else who would enjoy this as well, share it with them.